If you've seen my previous video regarding Marika's Great Escape, you may have noticed some eerie similarities between Miquella's method of escaping the purview of the Greater Will and achieving ascendance, and Marika's own method. The crosses of Miquella denoting parts of himself that he abandoned may have appeared all too familiar. The final child of Marika, born into an age of gold, bereft of death, grew up in the midst of his traumatized mother's power moves to escape the Greater Will. One of these power moves was the slaying of Godwyn, who I believe was an aspect of Marika that she divested herself of, so that it could not hinder her, being her love, in order to pave the way for Ranni's ascension, entirely akin to Miquella and Saint Trina. For more context on this, please see my previous video, Marika's Great Escape, Sentient Horcrux Infusion Transfer. I'll be comparing these two methods throughout the video to hammer home the point that Miquella copied his mother, almost to a T. He recognized the success of the blueprint, but the flaw in the overall design and result. To a child, mother is as God, and witnessing his own mother's struggle against a higher power, witnessing the state of the lands between and the curses inflicted upon his siblings, Miquella the Kind chose to spend his time attempting to undo the curse of his sister's rot, and then grant his brother Godwyn a true death, to save him from a fate worse than death. In the DLC, everyone is shocked that Miquella does not revive Godwyn, but instead revives Radahn to be his consort. To that I say, first off, the only reference to Godwyn outside of Castle Sol in regards to Miquella is the Golden Epitaph, wherein Miquella wishes his brother a true death. Why was Godwyn not the chosen consort, but instead Radahn? Well, I would argue that it's always been Radahn, and attempting to offer Godwyn a true death was simply a compassionate mercy, akin to his desire to free Malenia of her rot. Furthermore, if my previous video holds any merit, then Godwyn is in fact an aspect of Marika, that aspect being her love, which she divested in the same manner Miquella did with Saint Trina. Therefore, Godwyn would be incompatible as a consort for Miquella for obvious reasons, including that his destiny was already planned by Marika to be a sacrifice for Ranni, and therefore Marika's ascension. Even if this isn't the case, the fact that Godwyn was used in this profane ritual would have made it impossible for Miquella to undo, given his soul was obliterated, and that solar eclipses are dictated by the movements of the moon, and that Lunar Princess Ranni had no intention of allowing her work to be undone. In their childhood, in the chaos of the curses that plagued his siblings, Radahn's strength and kindness, his tenderness, and his compassion shone like a blinding light to the young Miquella. The world he would have, one where such strength accompanied by compassion would rule, embracing all, the strength to conquer the world and maintain the order, coupled with the compassion that would guide it. Radahn is a manifestation of his very vision for the world, perhaps the same way that a younger brother idolizes his older brother, or perhaps in some more George R.R. Martin sense, Miquella courted his older brother, and between them they made a vow. I believe the events went something like this. As Miquella grew and watered the Erdtree with his own blood, the Night of the Black Knives signaled the beginning of the end for Marika's plans for her great escape. Realizing this or not, Miquella tried to offer his brother Godwyn a true death to release him from a fate worse than it. During this, he was constructing the Erdtree as a refuge for the abandoned. Those who in the new world Marika built were cast aside to encompass all in his love and embrace. When offering Godwyn a true death failed, and the eclipse did not work, and Ranni advanced her own plans, I wager this was the point of realization for Miquella regarding what his mother was doing, and that the requirement for drastic measures was realized. If he were to bring about an age of compassion, if he were to build a world where all was accepted. He alone would need to do it. I don't know if it was at this point that the vow was made, or perhaps a plan to support the vow was made. Regardless, Radahn sought the tutelage of the Alabastan Lords to teach him the ways of gravity magic, in order for him to hold the stars. It's never explicitly explained why he did this, but I believe we now know. This paused the fates of all demigods, including Marika, in the form of Rani, preventing their fates from eventualizing and giving Miquella the time he needed to put all of his pieces in place. I believe it's also possible or likely that he had embedded himself in the Erdtree far earlier and discovered the lands of shadows as Saint Trina, exploring this world and learning the truth of the Golden Order and its origins and the tragedy of his mother's story. In order to personally enter the lands of shadows, not as Saint Trina, but himself, he required the assistance of Mohg and a profane ritual of blood, almost like a blood crucible, to send his whole self there. Mohg would also be used as an integral part of his plans to help Radahn escape the purview of the Greater Will, just like Rani did with Godwyn. Once he had divested himself of the necessary parts, left the necessary clues, and recruited the right people, Malenia was sent southward as a signal to Radahn that Miquella was ready, and that the stars no longer needed to remain suspended. In fact, they must now be returned to their normal state for his plans to come to fruition. Why would Malenia being sent to fight Radahn be any form of signal? Why not just relay a message in writing or something? Why relay a message in the midst of a cataclysmic battle that would consume Caelid? Despite his kindly nature, Radahn was feverish for war. He craved battle as a Redmane, and this was a core aspect of his personality. While compassionate, he was a warmonger and relished in honorable battle. As death was a requirement of his rebirth and escape from the other gods' purview and influence, Malenia would be the one to deliver it, as suicide for the honorable Radahn was out of the question. In that same vein, a planned loss for the honorable Radahn was also out of the question, which is why he set up contingencies. Malenia marching south to face him as a signal served three purposes. First, as a cover for their true intentions, to convolute the message so as to not cue the Greater Will or Marika that they were up to something. Malenia even whispers in his ear, "Miquella awaits you, promised consort," a nod to Radahn about what was to come next. Second, it is the most Radahn thing to organize. A battle as a cue. A battle, mind you, with the undefeated Empyrean is the most Radahn thing I've ever heard. In fact, this very well may have been a part of the vow for him to get to clash with this titan. Given Miquella says, our part of the vow, I believe he was referencing himself and Malenia. Third, Radahn had to die in order for his soul to be reprocessed and bound to a soulless body, a method of escaping the purview of the Greater Will that almost exactly mimics Rani's escape from the Greater Will by sacrificing Godwyn's soul and her body, a method I'm sure Miquella learned from his mother's actions. But Scum Mage Infer, Radahn didn't die after this battle, so that would crush everything you've just said, right? Well, no, Radahn did not die, but his wits did. He remembered nothing but the war, the battle, the thrill of the fight, eating corpses of enemies and allies alike, like a dog. In my opinion, and by no coincidence, Radahn had conveniently set a contingency by making a promise with Jeren that Jeren would ensure he died. Jeren promised Radahn a glorious death and was honor-bound to organize the festival of Radahn to offer his lord a proper death. unbeknownst to Jeren, so that Miquella's plan could continue. If Radahn knew of Miquella's plan and did not want to be involved with it, why then not request that Jeren instead lock his rotting body and mind away in a chamber, or just not start a festival to slay him at all, rendering him inaccessible to anyone, where he would remain rotting but alive with the stars still suspended outside of the reach of Miquella? But that's not what we see. Instead, he ensured his own death via Jeren, so that Miquella could perform the ritual that would return his soul to life, so that he could be the lord of a god, in a war of compassion, of course, for the conquest of the world. Frankly, a most fitting and typically Radahn move. Wars with compassionate opportunities, endless wars to gain and maintain control. What more could the compassionate warmonger ask for? It's like a dream come true. This is even acknowledged by who I would argue is his sister figure, Freya, who Radahn recruited into his inner circle.
From Sir Ansbach to me? What on earth could it... Yes, of course, I see. As the Festival of War concluded, General Radahn's soul met an honourable end, but kindly Miquella wishes to revive it, which is fine by me. I know it would pain old Jeren, but war has always suited General Radahn best, and certainly far more than any honourable death. Endless war to invigorate the soul, as befits General Radahn, the Great Lion. Thank you. Now I finally cast off my misgivings.
Now, I don't know about you, but my inner circle are to me like family. And if Freya believed this is what Radahn would have wanted even after learning of the ritual and what had happened, then this would suggest Radahn fully consented to this plan. Despite, of course, Jeren, who I would argue was like a father figure to Radahn, opposing, as Radahn made him promise him death, without the context of Miquella's plan. And if you're still not satisfied with those explanations of why Caelid was obliterated, fair enough. As pointed out to me by Featherstrode, Melania's ground zero for her Aeonic flower is directly above Miquella's cocoon. If you've seen my previous video on crucibles, you'll know that there are many, and that their function is to achieve something grand in nature, like the ascendance of a god. Perhaps this flower nuke and the resulting crucible of rot was in fact fully intentional, and as the blood crucible was required to send Miquella to the land of shadow, perhaps this new rot crucible assisted in allowing Miquella to be a bridge to the shadow realm for us. Miquella, like his mother before him, divested himself of many things, but most notably, love and loyalty. This was done so they could not hinder him, and so that they could be used instead as tools. Let me explain. Saint Trina is Miquella's love incarnate. Why would a being set on an age of compassion deprive his own self of love? For the same reason Marika did, by divesting herself of Godwin. Saint Trina represents love in all of its forms, including the extreme and toxic elements. I believe this is reinforced by the fact that she is associated with medicine and poison. Medicine and poison being two faces of the same coin, with many medicines being derived from poisons. She was divested originally to explore the Shadow Realm, while Miquella ascended in the Erdtree, and her love offered those who were suffering in a deathless world a compassionate way out, her eternal sleep being very akin to death itself. When she had served her purpose, she was discarded, so that Miquella's love would not hinder him, not the love for his sister, his companions, and especially for himself. As Trina has shown explicitly, she is capable of loving someone to death.
You must kill
This is similar to how Godwyn was divested by Marika and was used to quell the ancient dragons who opposed the Golden Order, and I believe ultimately sacrificed himself for Rani's cause, self-sacrifice being a toxic trait of love, and a trait that a being sent on godhood could not afford to have. Similarly, I believe Leda is in fact an aspect of Miquella himself. Of all of the followers, she is not only clearly the ringleader, but the only one that carries a rune, and a special one at that. Leda's rune, Blessing of the Needle Knight Leda, an unalloyed light that has never dwelled in an eye. Miquella gifted Leda with gentle gold to bring a soft hue to her faded eyes. We find Leda standing by the cross that represents Miquella's heart, and while the heart could represent a whole host of things, in this case, I believe it's not necessarily the physical sense, but instead the guidance of one's heart, the voice of one's heart. The Albinorics are fiercely loyal to Miquella. They would even follow him to the realm of blood, despite what that would ultimately mean for them, and guard the secret passage to the Erdtree with their lives. That said, Leda's appearance is strikingly similar to that of the Albinoric women, and I do not believe that this is a coincidence. I hypothesize that she in fact is an Albinoric, a race that really represents loyalty to the young Empyrean, who was either created to hold or imbued with Miquella's loyalty. While she is loyal to Miquella, unquestionably, her loyalty, just like Saint Trina's love, also obviously ventures into the extreme, to the point of paranoia and even murder. Separated from Miquella, she gathered and managed those who were bound by Miquella's charm, channeling them through his many clues, and fickly deciding to murder them based on the feeling of her heart, as a sort of contingency plan for after the charm broke. By separating his loyalty into Leda, just like his mother by divesting Radagon, who I would argue is her loyalty incarnate, he ensured he would not be tied to loyalty to his family or friends, nor any conflicts of loyalty, like Radagon with Marika and the Golden Order, or Renala, and could perform the calculated and morally questionable moves required for his ascendance. When she had served her purpose, she herself was also discarded along with the remaining party, left to guard the entrance of the Divine Gate, her zealous loyalty lashing out at anyone who would dare approach the kindly Miquella. So why did Miquella divest himself of so much in order to ascend? Aside from this method being seemingly a requirement to prevent him from becoming a puppet to outer gods, giving them no vessel to inhabit, I believe it is because he saw the method his mother used and its success, but he also saw the flaws in the results. By divesting himself of all of these elements, Miquella essentially committed ego death, ensuring the version of himself that would rule over the age of compassion would be just, fair, and free of prejudice born of favoritism, notions of loyalty to one person or another, toxic love that could drive him to ruin everything that he had built, to solidify his convictions, and ensure he moved relentlessly towards his goal, so that all would be encompassed in his embrace, and that all would find sanctuary in the world that he envisioned. He copied his mother's method of divesting troublesome but useful aspects of himself. He copied his mother's method of freeing Radahn from the greater will in the same way Rani freed herself. He copied his mother's method of guiding useful tarnished and characters to assist in the achieving of his goals. He copied his mother's method of ascending to godhood by carving away anything that could be used by the outer gods and then using the Divine Gate. Hell, he even copied his mother's taste in men. Like mother, like son. And lastly, if my previous video about Rani being Marika holds any merit at all, then this comparison of Rani's endgame speech and Miquella's cut endgame speech should be very telling.
I do solemnly swear.
I hereby swear.
To every living being. and every living soul.
To every living being and every living soul.
Now cometh the age of the stars.
Now comes the age of our Eden.
1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon.
1,000-year voyage, guided by compassion.
Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond.
Beginning here, love encompasses all.
Into fear, doubt, and loneliness. As the path stretcheth into darkness.
No living thing will be denied. No deed censured. I am ready to embrace the whole of it.
Let us go together, my dear consort eternal.
Let us go together. Radahn, my promised consort.
One last word, given what I've just explained and now that you all know. I have one thing left to say. Sacrilege will not be overlooked, and those who dare approach the kindly Miquella will know the wrath of the Shadows of Light. Myself on PlayStation, and the unstoppable maidens Kate the Kind and Kite the Compassionate on PC will be leading a crusade of compassion, kindly removing from existence anyone foolish enough to raise their weapons to the beloved Miquella. Join us, the Shadows of Light. If you wish, put SOL in your name so that they'll know from where you come, and grief those bereft of sense, those who would defile the radiant light of the kindly Miquella. Together, we shall devour the Ice Witch simps and those who think themselves a god. See the description for the Discord link.